Welcome back to the Formant podcast. And today we're talking about what happens when a major automotive and fleet company decides that robotics is going to be part of its future. So I'm joined today by Joe Foster, who leads Holman Robotics at Holman. So if you don't know Holman, they've been a major player in the fleet and automotive for decades. They're basically helping large organizations manage, operate, and maintain vehicles at scale. And now Holman has stepped into the robotics world in a pretty meaningful way. They're not a robotic manufacturer. What they are is a fleet company that looked at robots and says, this is another type of assets our customers will rely on, and we would like to lead in this space. So in this conversation, I want to explore why they got into robotics in the first place and how they see robotics adjacent to part of their traditional fleet business, and maybe what the rest of us can learn about the future of large fleets and operations from this conversation. So, Joe, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Henry.
Holman as a big name in fleet and automotive. How would you describe Holman today for the listener?
Yeah, so like you said, I'm leading the commercial efforts for Holman Robotics. I got the awesome opportunity to start innovating our products, looking at new ways of delivering to our customers. And that got me into this space of exploring new and innovative things that might be disruptive to our businesses in the future. And felt natural to actually slide into what is our newest business.
Yeah, let's talk about that story. Like, what's the inception? What triggered the idea?
Yeah, so I mean, post-COVID, with all the thinking of opportunity is out there now that we're emerging from our houses and work from home scenario, we started looking at on-road autonomous vehicles and said, listen, there's some disruption occurring there. And we started talking to our customers, asking them what disruptive effects might autonomy have in their business. And turns out on-road vehicles was not the thing that they were most concerned about. It was more so their off-road equipment in their warehouse and in manufacturing plants, and just your regular, people moving and parts moving taking place in yards and facilities. And when that portfolio, when they exposed us to that part of the portfolio that was becoming a disruptor for them, we really doubled down on our efforts to figure out what might they need. And that's really where we looked at that equipment and said, that's becoming autonomous in a hurry, much faster than on-road vehicles. And so that really was the beginning of our journey, where our top customer said, listen, you need to help us here. This is another asset that we're being asked to manage. How do we do this? And that's where we set out on a journey to figure out what role can we play to help our customers.
So you get customer signal. That's certainly a good place to start. But
yes,
internally, you're entering outside your classic wheelhouse.
Yeah.
What were some of the internal questions, concerns you and the team worked through?
Yeah, I mean, can we solve the problems that exist in that space, right? Like, it's new. Is there something we're qualified to do? Cost and complexity, if I were to really simplify, were the barriers. And we said, you know what? I mean, that's what we encounter in fleet management. Solutions need to be tailored. Each customer has its own complexities. We're familiar with that, and there's some qualifications we have that we think we can apply to this space.
It's interesting how you talk about how traditional automotive, of course, autonomy is big in automotive as we speak, and you're in robotics as well. So it seems like we're converging on a future where we're going from very mechanical vehicle to something that's much more digital. What do you think about the future of Holman's business as these things converge?
Yeah, so we are very steeped in a tradition of managing vehicles and the life cycle of vehicles. And our journey of doing that was really listening to customer problems, building products to support them over decades. Now here comes new machines, new equipment that don't exactly have a mature market and a mature ecosystem to figure this out for. So we're pioneering our efforts to apply what we've learned in vehicle fleet management and find the ways that there is carryover, and then adapt to the things that are different. Very much when a customer looks at their equipment and their entire asset portfolio, maybe now or into the future, the distinction between whether it's autonomous or an on-road vehicle should matter less to them. And what should matter more is that we're supporting them in managing that life cycle of all that equipment.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Even as as it becomes very digital, there you are still also in the world of atoms, and things break down and things needs maintenance, and a lot of your physical problems remain.
Right. I mean, you know, it's a machine. The machine is highly becoming more and more technologically advanced, which is great. There are still, there's still challenges around the selection of the right machine. What's the way I'm going to procure and fund that machine? And then what's going to give me some certainty that it's the right machine for me to use? And then when I need to make decisions on further investment, how am I going to validate that investment up against the data I may have from my existing machines and their history?
Yeah, that's interesting. So we're talking about the overlaps between more traditional fleet management and managing robots. Now you're early on in this robot endeavor, but are there ways that these two things are completely different as well that you have learned?
Well, yes. I mean, the market is more fragmented than an automotive market that's been around for a century at least. And so there's an overload of information available to some maybe not so informed customers that need to get up to speed to understand what's possible. And so there can be issues with that where if you've created an awesome robot that does the function you expect it to do, how do you relay that information to someone who's never interacted with a machine like that before? So helping them translate in between what the user wants and what the robot maker has designed and brilliantly built, that's different. But then as we talk about a lot, just the sources of data that you get that can unlock value to your business that you don't have access to in like the traditional labor environment where these automations are occurring. That is a major difference. Vehicle telemetry came a long way over the last 20 or 30 years, and that got everyone excited about these loads of data that are coming our way, and we can start displaying a lot of data to tell customers what's going on. But what really became apparent in the robotic space was the actions you can drive immediately off of the data. Like you can make business process change, whether it's in a warehouse and you're now seeing the robots are traveling a certain distance to pick a certain SKU. That's data that when a person was walking to that bin was not available to you. You couldn't drive business change on it. So that's really where automation can advance your business decisions you make. That part is slightly different than the vehicle fleet, which they're both tools. They're both helping companies perform a job, and companies perform the service that they're providing to their customers. But the data available in robotics and the unique functions that they can serve, really, really is just out of the gate already advanced.
This is part of our path with Formant as well. And I think things that we are learning together as well is the robots are an early sign of the machines to come. In tomorrow, all machines will be throwing off much data. In fact, I think a lot of machines out there, as you and I have discussed, are actually capable of throwing off a bunch of data that's not actually being paid attention to right now. So as a result, a lot of machines out there, basically, they could have told you their state at any given time, but you wait for them to fail. And then now it's a fire drill and you react. And one of these things that I think is really interesting in this moment, and I think you speak to this, is that we can learn more about what we think sort of the advanced environment that features machines in physical operations tomorrow look like. Tomorrow would like to look like tomorrow by looking at robots today and how much data they'll throw off. And of course, your traditional business of vehicles, you have autonomous vehicles. Autonomous vehicles, of course, throw off an extraordinary amount of data as well. So you're already seeing these things converge. And I think this is currently gathering steam under the banner of physical AI.
It's a big banner.
I think that sometimes things people get excited about because it's a mirror that everybody sees something different in. But when you think physical AI, what does that mean to you?
Look, a lot of my experience draws on a lot of the conversations we get to have in the industry together, in that the data being distributed from a robotic device on its own may not be what solves larger business problems. It might just help the robot do a good job at roboting the way
Right.
it's supposed to. What our mission is, and so is Formant's, is just to be able to aggregate and see a more connected experience larger than the robot itself, and be able to drive business outcomes that are larger than just the machine data that and performance data you're getting off of that. Physical AI and how we see it, I mean, what we get excited about, I guess, is the detection, like you talked about, the detection of things before they happen. And when the data, they're going to wait till an error happens, and then make a call, and then have a dispatch, and then some time goes by, and now you have some downtime issues. We both believe, I think, is that if we can detect those anomalies, queue up the right preventative measures before there's really a downtime event, I think that's just an amazing skill we hope to bring to the market with the use of the data the robots are giving off. Items like perimeter security, how does that work, and how can that be a additive function to a corporation? Industrial floor cleaning, as simple as that is, it's a dull task and dirty,
Mhm.
I guess you'd say.
Right.
And then just the ideas of moving goods in a dynamic environment. And we deal with that a lot in fleet management, which is we want to start with what you're trying to solve, and we'll find the right piece of equipment to be that tool for you. And I would like to see a more of a change to that, because I think customers, it'd be best if they're able to bring their business problem to the forefront first, instead of match a piece of equipment and make it work in their own environment. So the information that's available and just the way they're solving problems, we're poised, right, to try and guide customers through that a little better.
I want to double click on what you said about the granularity of data, the opportunity that these data rich machines gives you as a business owner to run your business at a tighter level of visibility. That gets into what Holman and Formant have collaborated on, which is a software platform around this robotics business that you all are building. That's something where robots are materially different. So you're a fleet management base, you're getting into robotics. You realize that robotics is different with all this data. So can you walk through what were these problems you were trying to solve when you started looking at robotics and as a software problem?
Our fleet management business, after decades, we've understood all along that certainty is super important, right? These are assets that are an investment to that company. Having certainty over how they're going to perform, and reducing the variability downstream of the life cycle of that piece of equipment has always been important, and we've always tried to tailor products to fit that. How it became different in robotics is that the certainty is more around, did I make the right choice? Is this the right investment? And is it performing up to the benchmark I had when I made this big decision? Because this is a big decision. This is not I have a car and now I'm replacing that car and I know what a car should do and how it should perform. This is, I have this workflow and I'm now changing to a new workflow with a machine, and I really want to know if I made the right choice. Unlocking the data to help tell that story, that was a clear-cut need right out of the gate, to just say, how do we help customers track their investment like they would with a vehicle, but with certainly much different data points to help prove that. And this is where the robot data coming off the device was the best measurement, along with knowing the customer's success points of how they measure time, how they measure an improvement, how they measure their labor efficiencies. That really became just such a necessity to say, we need to just and monitor each one of these assets. Doesn't matter what it is. We need to serve this up in a way that a customer can see across their portfolio of assets how they're performing, and did it measure up to the investment I made in it. Anytime you'd implement a process change or a workflow change at all, you're trying to measure and validate the success of that. And, this is my non-technical point of view, that I want to know that that investment or that change worked to the benefit. And then even better, if it unlocks further value, what is that? And how is that making my business become more predictable, more consistent, make my people safer? And ultimately, and we probably talk about this more because we like to share macro trends, but look, this is not taking jobs away. This is enabling companies to become more competitive at a global scale. And if you get more predictable and more consistent and you improve your processes through robots, you're hiring more people and you're scaling your business even better. So why wouldn't I want to monitor that to get to a point of really competitiveness and growth?
Yeah, that's mirrors, I feel, how I've learned to talk to people about robots over time as well. Is like we think of them, the word robot alone evokes humanoids and a bunch of other things that seems very futuristic and kind of often this anthropomorphic shaped machine that does these things. But the truth is, like, it's a tool, it's a machine. And actually, I find that it's easier to talk about tools and machines because it's almost like sometimes I feel like if I introduce the word robot, it's almost like I'm voluntarily digging myself into a hole that I first have to get myself out of. Because if you put the lens of tool and machine on it, a machine that can transport parts inside a dealership, oh, that's smart. That's great. I get it. But if you say robot, now people are thinking some humanoid shape that walks around, and now you get all these other things. And so sometimes I do think that the legacy of the language, both across robotics and AI for that matter, is sometimes feels so counterproductive when you're trying to talk to practical people who are just trying to make their businesses better.
We've been adding machines and tools throughout the years to make our businesses better, our people safer. That is not strange. So yeah, talking about it in a way that makes more sense to the people on a warehouse floor, a plant floor, in a security desk, you know, in infrastructure, trying to manage all their sites, it makes a lot more sense.
Right, right. Speaking of these customers, it's early days, but I wonder if you have noticed patterns in which customers lean in first. For example, are there certain industries that have adopted more willingly? Is there a type of leader? You're a business guy, you look for patterns. Like, what are some patterns you have observed?
Yeah, that sales intelligence, right? Of knowing what the signals are.
That's right.
Manufacturing, there's a genuine need to automate because there is demand. Just talking US specifically, there's generous demand for manufacturing, but there's still hundreds of thousands of unfilled jobs, and it puts businesses in this, I'll still call it that they're offensive. The ones that we're having great interactions with, they're playing offense. They're going, if I can modernize faster than my competition, I'm going to win in this space. And this is where you're seeing transformation and strategy offices take more of a role in companies automating. You're seeing at a private equity level helping their portfolio companies automate to help them drive more consistency and up the valuation of that business. You're seeing companies play offense in those spaces, especially. And then, where most of the press has been in terms of large scale projects has been in warehousing. The main 3PLs and e-commerce solutions that are out there are highly automated, and they're automating even further. If they're at 60% automated, they're still trying to get even further along. So that's where the conversations are. It's not as abstract. It's more like, yeah, we've already understood the business value that automation can bring, and we're just trying to figure out how to continue to expand that. And that becomes a great opportunity to be able to look at their legacy automation projects and make sure that they're performing well, not just looking at new implementations. Yeah, warehousing, manufacturing, especially in a space where they're taking an offensive approach against their competition. That probably leads us to talk about what's going to happen with the people that don't get going. But there is that leading edge of people who are transforming their business and realizing they're looking at it a little more long term, and they're not worried about the results of maybe next quarter or this year, but more so realizing I'm going to unlock tremendous value if I can automate now and be ready and fully automated in 3 years or 5 years, whatever the time horizon is.
Right, right. I hear you. It's sort of the classic story when the wind starts blowing. Some people build walls and some people build windmills. You should build windmills.
Shouldn't that be our theme here? Yeah, build windmills.
That's right.
No,
That's
I
right.
mean it is there, and look, not everybody's there. Not everybody's ready for that, and something will drive them there, right? Something will, whether it's a macroeconomic impact, whether it's a demand issue they're facing themselves, or an injury, or something that creates almost like a desperate mode. I would prefer to get out in front of that and talk to companies and help them avoid the desperation move and play a little offense. And that's where you're finding there are companies that are certainly wanting to play offense.
Yeah, that's interesting. If we zoom out a little bit from your perspective, what are the big trends and we could say robotics, but wider technology as well that have you genuinely excited?
Look, I think doing the most they can with AI. I mean, it's just such a buzzword, but like you and I know that there has to be meaning behind it. And I think, we all catch the bug of what AI can do through our own personal experiences and maybe some trials within our enterprises. AI requires a fossil fuel, and sure, ChatGPT, the internet is our fossil fuel for that. It's just chewing up data. At an enterprise level, you have to give it the fossil fuel to chew up. And then it can be entirely beneficial to your business. But if you can't connect it and you can't aggregate and you can't pull the data and it's disparate and fragmented, that's a dangerous position to be in. And I think a lot of companies, robotics gets tied into this digital transformation conversation. And we hear this with, larger consulting projects, but it gets tied into that because the commonality and synthesizing of the fossil fuel is so important to actually use AI. I mean, I think we're in this really interesting state where certain companies are more agile to get started than others. That to me is, it's gonna, here sitting with the robotics logo on, it has a vast impact on our business. Is companies need a strategy, because as you get it in one place and as you start using AI to chew up the data and make reason and drive business outcomes, things like automation are natural conclusions.
I get that there's a lot of buzz about AI right now. And I also get that it's sure, but what do I do? What's practical right now? Is it for making funny pictures that make my kid laugh? But I do feel like we are seeing it brought back to something pretty practical, right? The concept of data rich, action poor. Every business out there has used digital technologies through software, through the phones we have in our pockets, God knows. And now we're increasingly adding hardware as well that throws up data. So every business out there right now, whether it meets the naked eye or what, is very data rich. How do you turn that data into business value? I think that's where AI will create a meaningful impact in our space. And I think that is truly something new in the world. I think a lot of these businesses have been hard places to adopt technology within, but I think the technology have gotten to a place where what I'm seeing right now play out practically definitely has me thinking this is important. And I think we can bring it down to eye level. It does not have to be something that a bunch of crazy people out here in Silicon Valley are excited about. I think it has value today for people who are those people who are willing to lean in.
Well, and you're experiencing this not only from a robot perspective of like how can you unlock just OEMs to better support their product, to make better decisions, but also at an enterprise level in some of your interactions. And you see that data rich, action poor piece playing out in your customer base as well, right?
That's right. Every day, every day. It's interesting the extent to which it's a black box. And one of my favorite quotes is from HP days. Somebody 20, 30 years ago at HP says, if HP knew what HP knows, we would be doing so much better. If you could make all this data that exists inside of our organization leverageable, actionable, today we'd be doing so much better. And I think finally it's possible to know what the collective, it's finally the collective knowledge, data, intelligence of a business can finally be wielded in a much more effective way these days through the leverage of AI that helps us absorb all this stuff and create meaning out of it.
And
So it's an
and this
interesting
is,
moment.
well, it is. And this is what's exciting for us to get into robotics is there's things we're going to learn and be able to be very agile and perform in robots that can be applied back to a vehicle space. And that becomes exciting is where the paths converge in being able to action quickly in a new industry that's really agile to begin with, right? I mean, we see this, the development cycles for product, not only hardware but software, are so fast. And this is the robotics industry is a space where it's great to be in because of the agility that this industry has, but also what technology is bringing to the table.
So Holman and Formant, we have a very active collaboration. Who else do you find yourself partnering with as you build out Holman Robotics?
Yeah, I think when we look at how we've partnered up in a decades long fleet business, it's always been, we have to have really strong OEM relationships. So OEMs that can carry us to the places and with their product that we need to meet our customers with. So, I mean, in like I've talked about warehouse and logistics and manufacturing, you got to have a really good, strong set of AMR partners, and many of them, because while one forklift's great at reaching, the other may be great at loading and unloading, and another might be really great at pallet movement or stacking, and you have to have a lot of different ideas and solutions to bring to the customer. So OEMs, we want to have a good, healthy amount of relationships that serve the customers in the industries that we're in, just like we have with the vehicle side of our business. On the technology side, and this is where we find ourselves in such alignment, is you need to be wide. To be wide and be able to serve a lot of common but sometimes uncommon purposes for the customer base. So wide with technology is super important. Why Formant, being able to aggregate robot and machine data in numerous ways is important to us being able to serve our customers across all the different types of equipment that they have. So partnering becomes kind of two pieces, is really having a strong set of OEM partners, but then technology players that can help bring it all together. Formant, we've made investments in and invested in a few other companies, but like that's our thesis, is just to remain wide with technology and then make sure we have enough hardware solutions to support our customers.
So in your day-to-day life now, you are talking to customers and they might be curious about robotics. And then there's always that question of the first step. What do you say to them? Where should they start?
What's really been exciting is catching people at lots of different places in their journey. I mean, we've had conversations with potential customers that are 90% automated, are just looking for that last final piece and already kind of know what they want, and we just have to provide some assurance that it's going to work. And then people that I know I need to look at automation. I'm so busy with so many other things. I don't even know what the first things I would do, and we need to help them, and we need to partner with solutions provider to help let's just come up with the top 5 and figure out what's possible for your business. So we're seeing companies on a long journey. It's very wide in terms of the places that they're starting. I think the first place I want to be really clear with customers is like, let's talk about the business problem. When we're approached with someone who goes, I think I want this robot, there's usually this walk back period of why, what value do you think it's going to deliver? How is that going to affect other workflows? And then you end up saying, can we solve something a little bit more boring to make sure it works and make sure that you're ready and you're on a good path? Because we know, and the stories of robots collecting dust somewhere in a warehouse, somewhere in a manufacturing plant, because someone saw a commercial and wanted to put those robots in, but didn't look at regulatory problems or didn't look at safety concerns or didn't want to change their workflow. And now the robots are collecting dust. We don't want that. None of us in this space want that. So I think what we end up doing most is walking back like the reasoning for why they want to automate and make sure that it's going to drive business value. And it's kind of pulling away from them presenting us with, I want a robot that performs security. Cool. Is that really the first place we want to start? How do you think that's going to deliver on business value to you? Maybe we look at something a little more monotonous that helps upskill your people. A lot of times, and it's a high value thing, like a welder is the first thing they may look at. Maybe that's not the best place to start. Maybe welder's not the problem. Maybe it's all the grinding and sanding and finishing that has to happen before that could be automated first. And I think we want to bring that kind of conversation to the table, is let's talk about your business problem first, and let's unpack where we can drive some value.
That's why you have to imagine that your own internal deployment efforts allows you to speak somewhat authoritatively on what that looks like, because presumably you all have had some trial and error yourself on the path to these more robust robotics deployments you're now doing.
Yeah, and being able to be pragmatic and not salesy, I guess you'd say, coming from a salesperson, but just saying, listen, for what your business is like and how you're hoping that robot to work, I don't think it's going to work. Like being able to say that, and I mean, yeah, you lose a sale, but like you're trying to help customers with business outcomes, and walking them back to say to get to what makes most sense. It's just better in the long run. We want long-term customers. We don't need to sell that one robot to feel good about ourselves. We want to make sure this works. And because usually that customer's putting robot number 1 or 10 or 5 into place, we need to be all over it and make sure it works, because there's so much opportunity within each customer to grow in terms of other ideas for automation. So we got to make sure that first one works. And in order to do that, it might take us saying, no, we don't think it's the right idea. But that's, I mean, look, you got to be that way and drive business value for them.
Makes so much sense. So lastly, let's try and just zoom way out. So when you think about Holman 5, 10 years from now, what's your personal vision for what role robotics and maybe let's say technology as well will play in your business and for your customers?
I think of us being able to make more investments in this space and really be a strong player in the ecosystem. What we talk about between Formant and Holman and many others is it takes a village, right? You can't be this end-to-end solution and siloed in your own approach. And that's one thing that we've seen change ever since we've launched, is more scaled partners are willing to talk about this ecosystem play. It's saying, doing it all ourselves sounds great, but maybe that's not the right path. Let's find ways to partner. And that's a great breakthrough.
I'm excited to partner for this journey. And that also feels like a great place to end. Joe, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you. And thank you for your partnership with Holman. And it's just exciting to see what's going to come.
Yeah, let's go get it.